bound in icy iron, your body folds inward, chest crushed until blood drips from your nose. This is the Scavenger's daughter, the Tudor crown's brutal answer to rebels who dared defy the throne. Chapter 1. The Tudor Powder Keg. Picture this. It's the turbulent 16th century in England, a time when kings and queens ruled with iron fists, and rebellions simmered like a pot ready to boil over. We're diving into the world of Tudor England, where Henry VIII and his successors faced threats from all sides: religious uprisings, political plots, and peasant revolts that could topple the throne. In this era, maintaining order wasn't just about armies and laws. It involved fear, and that's where brutal inventions like the Scavenger's daughter came in. This device, often overshadowed by the infamous rack, was a tool of compression torture, squeezing the life out of dissenters to extract confessions or simply crush resistance. But to understand its horror, we need to step back and explore the chaotic landscape that birthed it. Tudor England was a powder keg. Henry VIII's break from the Catholic Church in the 1530s sparked the dissolution of the monasteries, where he seized church lands and wealth, angering devout Catholics and displacing thousands. This led to the Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536, a massive northern rebellion where over 30,000 people rose up, demanding the restoration of monasteries and an end to religious reforms. Henry crushed it mercilessly, executing leaders like Robert Aske by hanging him in chains until he rotted. Then came the Prayer Book Rebellion in 1549 under Edward VI, where Cornish and Devonian folk protested the new Protestant prayer book, seeing it as an attack on their traditions. Over 4,000 died in battles, and survivors faced harsh reprisals. Mary I's reign brought the Wyatt's Rebellion in 1554, a Protestant plot against her Catholic restoration, led by Sir Thomas Wyatt, who marched on London with 3,000 men. Though it failed, it highlighted the deep divisions. And under Elizabeth I, the Northern Rebellion of 1569 saw Catholic earls trying to replace her with Mary, Queen of Scots, resulting in hundreds executed. These uprisings weren't just isolated events. They reflected a society torn by religious flip-flops, economic woes like enclosure of lands driving peasants into poverty, and fears of foreign invasion from Spain or France. The Crown's response: a network of spies, harsh laws like the Treason Act, and torture to root out conspirators. Torture wasn't legal in England for common crimes, but for treason and heresy, it was fair game. Especially in the Tower of London, the epicenter of royal interrogation. Here, devices were crafted to break bodies and wills without always leaving permanent marks, though many did. The Scavenger's daughter fit right into this arsenal, invented around 1530 by Sir Leonard Skevington, Henry VIII's lieutenant of the Tower. Skevington, a loyal enforcer, designed it as an alternative to the rack, which stretched victims. Instead, this one compressed them, forcing the body into a ball and tightening until bones cracked and blood flowed. Why call it the Scavenger's daughter? It's a corruption of Skevington's daughter, playing on how it's scavenged or squeezed. Out confessions. Practical tip for history buffs: when studying Tudor rebellions, map them out to plot the Pilgrimage of Grace on a northern England map to see how geography fueled discontent, with remote areas feeling ignored by London. Or read primary sources like Edward Hoare's Chronicles for eyewitness vibes on the chaos. Examples abound. Take Cuthbert Maine, a Catholic priest tortured with it in 1577 under Elizabeth for treasonous activities. He endured the compression but stayed silent, only to be executed later. Or an Askew, a Protestant martyr under Henry, who faced the rack but might have known of similar compressions. Her story shows how torture crossed religious lines. The device's ingenuity lay in its portability and efficiency. It could be used in secret chambers, leaving victims gasping for days. But why focus on rebels? Because in a time when one wrong word could label you a traitor, this tool symbolized the crown's desperation to stomp out sparks before they became fires. It wasn't just physical pain. It was psychological warfare, making examples to deter others. Imagine the whispers in taverns, heard about the northerner who talked too much. They put him in Skevington's irons bled like a stuck pig. That fear kept the masses in line. Of course, not all rebellions were crushed solely by torture. Diplomacy and executions played roles too. But devices like this amplified the terror. A quick example: during the Northern Rebellion, over 800 were hanged. But preliminary tortures in the Tower extracted names, widening the net. Tip: if you're writing a historical novel, incorporate sensory details, the creak of iron, the victims, muffled screams to make scenes vivid without gore overload. Wrapping up, this chapter sets the stage for why England needed such grim innovations. A realm rife with rebellion, where loyalty was enforced at any cost. We've seen the key uprisings and the Crown's ruthless playbook. Now, as we move to chapter 2, we'll zoom in on the man behind the machine, Sir Leonard Skevington, how his invention came to be, peeling back the layers of this Tudor terror tool. Chapter 2: Sir Leonard Skevington's dark legacy. Now that we've got the big picture of Tudor turmoil, let's zero in on the shadowy figure who dreamed up this nightmare. Sir Leonard Skevington. Born around the late 15th century, Skevington came from a family of loyal crown servants. His father, Sir William Skevington, was a big shot under Henry VII and VIII, serving as Master of the Ordnance and even Lord Deputy of Ireland, where he crushed uprisings with a heavy hand. Leonard followed in those footsteps, climbing the ranks to become Lieutenant of the Tower of London by the 1530s, right when Henry VIII was ramping up his religious reforms and facing backlash. As Lieutenant Skevington wasn't just a jailer. He was the king's enforcer in one of England's most feared fortresses, overseeing interrogations, executions, and the dirty work of keeping secrets buried. The Tower wasn't a cushy job. It meant dealing with high-profile prisoners, from nobles, plotting coups to priests, hiding forbidden books, all under the pressure of a paranoid monarch who demanded results. Skevington had to innovate, and that's where his infamous daughter enters the scene. Invented around 1530, the device was born out of a need for something more subtle and efficient than the rack, which pulled limbs apart and often left obvious scars that could embarrass the crown in public trials. Henry wanted confessions without the mess, and Skevington delivered a contraption that compressed instead of stretched, folding the body in on itself like a human vice. Why him? Skevington had a knack for mechanics, perhaps inherited from his father's ordnance, expertise. Think cannons and siege engines, where leverage and pressure were key. He likely sketched it out in the Tower's workshops, testing prototypes on lesser criminals before unleashing it on bigger fish. The name Skevington's daughter stuck as a grim joke, evolving into Scavenger's daughter over time because it scavenged truths from unwilling lips, or maybe alluded to how it picked clean the victim's resolve. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of its creation. In the early 1530s, with Henry's divorce from Catherine of Aragon heating up and the break from Rome looming, the Tower was buzzing with suspected traitors. Skevington, ever the loyalist, saw the rack's limitations. It could cripple victims too quickly, making them useless for further questioning. So, he designed a frame of iron hoops and bars that forced the prisoner to kneel, then ratcheted tight around the head, shins, and hands, pushing the body into a fetal position until the spine arched unnaturally and organs compressed. It was portable, easy to store in the tower's armory, and required minimal manpower, just a turn of the screw. Historical records are spotty, but chronicles like those from John Fox's Book of Martyrs hint at its debut during the suppression of early dissenters, where it squeezed out names of accomplices without outright killing. Take Edmund Campion, a Jesuit priest in the 1580s, though after Skevington's time. His torture echoed the device's legacy, showing how it endured. Or, closer to home, Skevington might have used it on monks resisting the dissolution, pressing them literally and figuratively to renounce their vows. Practical tip: if you're digging into Tudor inventors, start with the state papers, domestic, at the National Archives there, full of letters from Tower officials like Skevington detailing prisoner treatments. You can access digitized versions online for free and cross-reference with Fox's accounts for victim perspectives. Another example, Sir Thomas More, imprisoned in 1534, faced the rack, but whispers suggest Skevington's new toy was considered for him, though he was beheaded before full torture. The invention wasn't just technical, it was psychological. Skevington knew fear spread faster than facts, so he let rumors leak about his daughter, deterring would-be rebels before they acted. Imagine being a guard under him, stories of prisoners begging after mere minutes in the device would have made you think twice about disloyalty. But Skevington wasn't a monster without motive. He was a product of his time, rewarded with lands and titles for his ingenuity. Henry knighted him, and he married well, securing his family's status. Yet, his legacy is tainted by the 1540s. He faded from records, possibly dying around 1535, just as his creation gained notoriety. Tip for aspiring historians: visit the Tower of London exhibit on torture. They have replicas that let you visualize the scale. It's smaller than you think, about the size of a large backpack when folded. Or, if you're into reenactments, groups like the Tudor Society stage demos safely, of course, to show the mechanics without the pain. The device's birth also highlights Tudor engineering. Blacksmiths hammered the iron bands. Engravers added locks, all under Skevington's watchful eye. It wasn't mass-produced, but copies popped up in other prisons, spreading the terror. In essence, Skevington turned personal ambition into a tool of state control, blending family legacy with royal demands. His invention bridged medieval brutality with Renaissance cunning, making interrogation an art form. Wrapping this up, we've uncovered the man and the moment that birthed this beast, from Tower Lieutenant to infamous inventor. Next, in Chapter 3, we'll break down exactly how the Scavenger's daughter worked, its mechanics, the agony it inflicted, and why it was so devilishly effective at breaking even the toughest wills. Chapter 3. The mechanics of terror with the inventor in focus. It's time to dissect the Scavenger's daughter itself, how this iron beast operated, and why its design made it a master of misery. Picture a simple yet sinister setup: 3 curved iron bars forming a semicircle, connected by hinges and a central screw mechanism, much like a giant clamp. The victim was forced to kneel, with their head bowed forward, hands bound behind their back, and ankles secured. The bars encircled the body, one around the neck and shoulders, another at the thighs, and the third at the shins. Then the screw was turned, drawing the bars tighter and forcing the knees up to the chest, the head down to the knees, compressing the entire frame into a tight ball. This wasn't quick. Torturers ratcheted it gradually, increasing pressure over minutes or hours to maximize suffering without immediate death. The agony came from multiple fronts. First, the spine and ribs bent unnaturally, cracking vertebrae and fracturing bones. Then, internal organs squeezed, causing lungs to collapse and making breathing a desperate gasp. Blood vessels burst, leading to hemorrhaging from the nose, mouth, and ears. Victims often described it as feeling like their body was imploding. Unlike the rack's visible stretching, this left subtler marks, like bruises and internal bleeding, which could be hidden for trials. Its effectiveness, portability meant it fit in small cells, and the psychological build-up watching the screw turn broke minds before bodies. For instance, Jesuit priest Alexander Bryant in 1581 endured it for hours, yet confessed little, showing rare resilience, but most cracked fast. Tip: to grasp the physics, think of it as reverse leverage. The screw amplified force exponentially, turning a small twist into tons of pressure, similar to a carjack but on human flesh. Modern replicas in museums, like the Clink prison, demonstrate this safely. In short, its mechanics blended simplicity with sadism, making it ideal for extracting secrets in cramped tower chambers. Up next, Chapter 4 explores the victims who faced this horrorial rebels and heretics whose stories revealed the human cost of Tudor tyranny. Chapter 4: Victims of the Iron Gripped. Now that we understand the Scavenger's daughter's brutal mechanics, let's meet the rebels and heretics who faced its crushing embrace. In the 16th century, the Tower of London was a revolving door for those accused of treason or heresy, and this device was reserved for the most defiant. Take John Gerard, a Jesuit priest in 1597, caught hiding Catholic texts during Elizabeth I's crackdown. Strapped into the iron frame, he endured hours of compression, his chest collapsing until he could barely whisper prayers, yet he gave no names. Or consider Margaret Clitheroe, a Catholic convert in 1586, who, while primarily pressed to death with weights, was threatened with Skevington's device to reveal priest hideouts. Her silence cost her life. These weren't just faceless prisoners. They were teachers, priests, and even nobles, like Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger, linked to the 1554 rebellion, whose interrogations likely involved the device to extract co-conspirators' names. The torture targeted the spirit as much as the body. Hours of slow tightening broke resolve, with guards taunting victims about their fate. The device's subtlety meant victims could still face public execution, their bruises hidden under clothes, preserving the crown's merciful image. Tip: to connect with these stories, check out the Jesuit Relations, a collection of missionary letters. Some describe torture vividly, available free online. The human cost was immense. Survivors often limped away with lifelong injuries, like crushed spines or ruptured organs, if they weren't executed. The Scavenger's daughter didn't just punish, it sent a message to rebels. Defiance equals agony. Next, in Chapter 5, the Tower's torture chambers will step inside the grim cells where this device was used, uncovering the eerie setting that amplified its terror. Chapter 5: The Tower's torture chambers, with the victims' stories fresh in our minds. Let's step into the chilling setting where the Scavenger's daughter did its grim work. The Tower of London's torture chambers, tucked deep within this fortress, these dank, stone-walled cells were designed to break even the stoutest hearts. Picture a small, windowless room, barely lit by flickering torches, with moisture dripping from the ceiling and the air thick with the stench of fear and mold. The chambers, often below ground in places like the White Tower's basement or the Beauchamp Tower, were cramped, some only 10 feet square, making the Scavenger's daughter's compact size perfect for use. Chains hung from walls, and the faint echo of screams lingered as prisoners were dragged in, blindfolded, to face the iron device. Its operation was chillingly quiet. No loud machinery, just the soft creak of the screw and the victim's gasps. Interrogators, often hardened tower yeomen, worked in pairs, one to tighten the bars, another to bark questions while a scribe noted confessions. The setting amplified terror. Prisoners like Guy Fawkes, though racked in 1605, described the tower's oppressive darkness as worse than the pain itself. Tip: visit the tower's online archives for 3D tours of the cells. Zoom into the graffiti carved by prisoners for a haunting glimpse into their minds. The chambers weren't just for torture. They were psychological traps, isolating rebels. From hope, some sessions lasted hours, with breaks to let victims dread the next round. The Scavenger's daughter left no blood on the floor, keeping cells clean for the next occupant. This eerie efficiency made the tower a symbol of royal power. Next, in Chapter 6, The Psychology of Fear, we'll explore how this device and its setting crushed not just bodies but the will to resist. Chapter 6, The Psychology of Fear, as we leave the tower's chilling chambers. Let's dive into the sinister psychology behind the Scavenger's daughter. A device that didn't just crush bodies, but obliterated the will to resist. In Tudor England, breaking a rebel's spirit was as critical as breaking their bones, and this torture tool was a masterclass in fear. Before victims even touched its iron frame, the process began. Guards would parade them past the device, its cold bars glinting. Under torchlight, whispering tales of past prisoners who begged for mercy. This wasn't just intimidation, it was a deliberate setup to fray nerves, making the mind conjure worst-case scenarios. Once strapped in, the real torment unfolded. The screw turned slowly, each click tightening the hoops, forcing the body into an unnatural ball. The gradual compression wasn't an accident. It gave victims time to dread each new wave of pain, their lungs struggling, heart pounding, as blood seeped from their nose or ears. Unlike a quick execution, this drawn-out agony played on primal fears of suffocation and entrapment, pushing even the bravest to the edge of panic. Jesuit priest Edmund Campion, tortured in 1580, later wrote through intermediaries of a mental anguish worse than physical wounds. His faith shaken by moments where he feared he'd betray his cause. The isolation before torture amplified this daze. In a dark, silent cell left prisoners starved for stimuli, so the device's grip felt like a descent into a personal abyss. Interrogators added to the mind games, pausing to offer false promises of freedom if names were given, sowing doubt and some victims, like Catholic recusant Margaret Ward in 1588, faced the device's threat and held firm, but most cracked. Their confessions less about pain and more about escaping the endless dread. The Crown knew this psychological warfare worked. Beyond the cell-released prisoners or their whispered stories spread terror in villages, making would-be rebels think twice. A merchant in York might hear of a priest's ordeal and decide hiding a Catholic was too risky. The Scavenger's daughter wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol, its mere existence a deterrent that kept dissent in check. This blend of physical and mental torment made it uniquely effective. turning defiance into despair with chilling precision. Next, in Chapter 7, Legal Loopholes and Torture Laws, we'll uncover how Tudor England justified such cruelty within its legal framework. Chapter 7, Legal Loopholes and Torture Laws. Having seen how the Scavenger's daughter broke minds as well as bodies, let's explore how Tudor England justified its use within a legal system that prided itself on fairness. Torture wasn't supposed to be routine. English common law forbade it for ordinary crimes, unlike in some European countries where it was standard. But for treason and heresy, the Crown carved out exceptions, exploiting vague laws to unleash devices like Skevington's invention. The Treason Act of 1351, expanded under Henry VIII, defined treason broadly plotting against the king, aiding enemies, or even questioning royal supremacy could land you in the Tower. Heresy, after the 1534 Act of Supremacy made Henry head of the Church, was another catch-all, snaring Catholics and Protestants alike depending on the ruler. Torture required a royal warrant, a formal nod from the Privy Council or monarch, which gave it a veneer of legality. These warrants, often issued in secret, cited state security to justify extreme measures. For example, in 1580, Elizabeth I's council approved torturing Jesuit priests like Robert Persons to uncover Catholic plots, with the Scavenger's daughter likely in play due to its efficiency. The device's appeal was its discretional like public floggings. It left internal injuries, letting the Crown deny brutality while parading repentant prisoners. Records from the state papers show over 80 torture warrants issued between 1540 and 1640, though the real number was likely higher, as many sessions went undocumented. The legal fiction was that torture persuaded rather than punished, extracting confessions to prevent greater threats, like Spanish invasions or gunpowder plots. Yet, it was a slippery slope. Vague accusations could trap innocents, like Merchant Thomas Norton in 1570, tortured for suspected Catholic ties but later released, broken but uncharged. The law's loopholes let the Crown act with impunity, making the device a quiet enforcer of royal will. Next, in Chapter 8, Rebels who defied the device, we'll meet the rare souls who endured its torment and held their silence, defying Tudor terror. Chapter 8, Rebels who defied the device from the murky world of Tudor laws that enabled torture. Let's turn to the extraordinary few who stared down the Scavenger's daughter and refused to break. These defiant souls, often driven by unshakable faith or fierce loyalty, turned the device's agony into a testament of resistance. One such figure was Jesuit priest John Gerard, captured in 1597 for smuggling Catholic materials amid Elizabeth I's persecutions. Bound in the iron hoops, his body compressed until ribs cracked and breath came in ragged gasps, Gerard endured multiple sessions, blood trickling from his ears, yet he revealed no hidden networks or fellow priests. His memoirs, smuggled out, later described the pain as a divine trial, strengthening his resolve rather than shattering it. Similarly, Alexander Bryant, another Jesuit in 1581, faced the device's slow crush for hours, his chest caving in, but he stayed silent on plot. Details, even carving a cross into his cell wall with his own blood, as a final act of defiance before execution. Women, too, showed remarkable grit and askew. A Protestant reformer under Henry VIII in 1546 was primarily racked but threatened with compression. She mocked her tormentors, reciting scripture through the ordeal without confessing heresy. These rebels weren't superhuman. They drew strength from ideology, like the Catholic recusants who saw torture as martyrdom, echoing early Christian saints. Their silence frustrated interrogators, sometimes leading to harsher ends. But it also inspired underground movement. Stories of Gerard's escape from the Tower in 1597 fueled Catholic morale across England. Not all survived. Bryant was hanged, drawn, and quartered, his unyielding stance a symbol against tyranny. Yet, their defiance exposed the device's limits. While it crushed many, it couldn't always conquer the human spirit. In an era where confession meant survival, these holdouts proved that some principles were worth the pain. Next, in Chapter 9, Legacy and Decline of the Scavenger's Daughter, we'll trace how this tool faded from use and its lasting mark on history's view of Tudor justice. Chapter 9, Legacy and Decline of the Scavenger's Daughter. As we've seen the unyielding spirit of those who defied the Scavenger's Daughter, let's now explore its lasting impact and why this brutal device eventually faded from England's grim arsenal. Born in the 1530s under Henry VIII's iron rule, the Scavenger's Daughter was a product of its time, a tool of control in a century of religious upheaval and political paranoia. Its legacy, however, stretches beyond the Tower's walls, shaping how we view Tudor justice and the ethics of torture itself. By the late 16th century, its use peaked during Elizabeth I's reign, when Catholic plots, like the Babington plot of 1586 and fears of Spanish invasion, kept the Tower busy. The device was a go-to for extracting names from suspected conspirators. Its ability to inflict intense pain without obvious external marks, making it a favorite for interrogators who needed clean prisoners for public trials or executions. For example, Anthony Babington, a key figure in the plot to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary, Queen of Scots, on the throne, faced torture in 1586. While records don't confirm the Scavenger's Daughter specifically, its frequent use on Catholic plotters suggests it played a role in squeezing out his 25 co-conspirators' names, leading to their brutal executions. Yet, as the 17th century dawned, the device's prominence waned. Several factors drove its decline. First, political shifts under James I, who took the throne in 1603, brought a slight softening of religious persecution. His early reign favored diplomacy over terror, reducing the need for such extreme measures. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605 was a notable exception, with tortures like the rack used on Guy Fawkes. But even then, the Scavenger's Daughter's mentions in records grew scarce, possibly because its specialized mechanics were less practical than the rack's straightforward stretching. Second, growing unease about torture's morality crept into English discourse. By the 1620s, figures like lawyer John Selden criticized the Crown's reliance on extrajudicial methods, arguing they violated Magna Carta's spirit. While torture wasn't banned outright until 1640 under Charles I, public sentiment, especially among the rising Puritan class, began to see such devices as relics of Catholic-style tyranny. Ironic, given their use against Catholics earlier. The device's physical decline also played a part, crafted by skilled blacksmiths. Its intricate ironwork was costly to maintain, and as the Tower's torture chambers saw less use, simpler methods like starvation or psychological pressure took over. By the English Civil War in the 1640s, the Scavenger's Daughter was largely a grim memory, replaced by public executions as the preferred spectacle of power. Its legacy, though, endured in chilling ways. Stories of its victims, like daring 1597 escape became legends in Catholic circles, fueling anti-Protestant propaganda across Europe. In England, chronicles like John Foxe's Book of Martyrs, widely read by the 1600s, immortalized the device as a symbol of Tudor cruelty, shaping later views of the era as barbaric yet calculated. The Scavenger's Daughter also left a subtle mark on penal history. It pioneered clean torture, influencing later methods that prioritized psychological over physical evidence of abuse, a tactic seen in modern interrogation debates. By the 1700s, the device was a museum piece, with replicas occasionally displayed in the Tower as curiosities for curious nobles, cementing its place in history's darker corners. Its decline didn't erase its impact. It highlighted a shift toward less overt brutality as England sought to distance itself from medieval excesses while still controlling dissent. The Scavenger's Daughter's story reminds us how fear was weaponized to maintain order, and its decline marks a turning point in how England wielded that power. Wrapping up, this device's legacy is a window into a brutal past where pain was power, and its decline marks a turning point in how England wielded that power. Next, in Chapter 10, The Scavenger's Daughter in Modern Memory, we'll examine how this torture tool lives on in literature, media, and our fascination with the Tudor era's darkest chapters. Chapter 10. The Scavenger's Daughter in Modern Memory after fading from use in the 17th century. The Scavenger's Daughter did not vanish from human awareness. Instead, it has taken on a second life in the modern era, reappearing in museums, historical literature, fiction, theatre, and even online discussions. What was once a hidden relic of Tudor cruelty has become a public object of fascination, a reminder of the extremes of human invention in the service of punishment. In museums across Europe, the device still commands attention. At the Tower of London, the historic Royal Palace's torture at the Tower exhibition includes replicas of the Scavenger's Daughter, alongside other infamous devices like the rack and manacles. Visitors can enter the very rooms where prisoners, such as Jesuit priest John Gerard, were compressed within its iron frame, surrounded by the same cold stone walls that once amplified the muffled cries of captives. Interactive displays explain the mechanics without gore, allowing visitors to imagine the suffocating pressure without experiencing it physically. The Royal Armouries in Leeds preserves an original mid-16th century set of iron restraints, believed to be a prototype labelled Skevington's Gyves after its inventor, Sir Leonard Skevington. Germany's Freiburg im Breisgau Torture Museum and Berlin's Torture Museum displays similar compression devices within broader exhibits on medieval punishments, encouraging reflection on the continuity of cruelty across different eras. Even smaller venues, like the Clink Prison Museum in London, keep a replica on display, blending education with the shock value that draws tourists beyond museum walls. The Scavenger's Daughter has found a place in the written word. In historical non-fiction, books such as Eric Ruling's Infernal Device, Machinery of Torture and Execution document its construction and purpose, placing it among other tools of execution and interrogation. In fiction, the device often becomes a dramatic symbol. Mike McIntyre's 2010 thriller The Scavenger's Daughter, a Tyler West mystery, imagines a modern serial killer in San Diego using replicas of medieval torture devices, including this one to dispatch victims, echoing the cruelty of Tudor interrogations. Academic works, such as Ayanna Thompson's studies of early modern performance, reference the device in broader discussions of torture's representation in literature and theatre. The stage has also reimagined The Scavenger's Daughter. A 2019 play of the same name used it as a central metaphor for historical trauma, merging the horrors of the past with the struggles of the present, and earning praise for its emotional intensity. Film and digital media have amplified the device's presence. While rarely portrayed directly in feature films, it appears in documentaries and dramatized history series such as The Tudors, where the compression method is hinted at in tense interrogation scenes. YouTube history channels create animated explanations of its mechanics, often gaining millions of views, while social media posts spark debates about torture's place in history and its parallels with modern interrogation techniques. In art, the rib-crushing curves of the device have inspired surrealist and biomechanical imagery, with some modern artists comparing its oppressive form to the works of H.R. Giger. Online discussions, especially in history-focused forums and Facebook groups, debate its function, ethics, and whether it truly represents the brutality of the Tudor state or has been exaggerated by legend. Its continued presence in public consciousness is not accidental. The Scavenger's Daughter's design is simple yet deeply unsettling, and in a world dominated by advanced technology, it serves as a stark reminder that human cruelty does not require modern tools to be effective. Its reappearance in popular culture warns against repeating the mistakes of history, while satisfying a morbid curiosity that blends horror with fascination.